Welcome to the Grandpa Channel, where stories don't fade, they get recorded. I'm Steve Harris. My grandkids call me Rivers. This podcast is where grandpas and grandchildren pull up a chair, turn on a mic, and let her rip. Grandpa stories are chock full of wisdom, life lessons, and frankly, funny as hell. Your stories are the magic elixir to help your grandkids navigate Mr. Toad's wild ride, aka life. Let's Grandpa. Listen up, grandpas. Have you actually pulled the trigger on recording your life story? I'm talking video, baby. They want to remember your corny jokes, your crooked smile, your rugged good looks, and the jaunty bounce of your voice. What if I told you there was a really easy way to do this? Recently, I sat down and I told my life story on video. Not the whole thing, but the good stuff, the messy stuff, the funny stuff. The parts I didn't want to forget and the parts that I did not want my kids and my grandkids to forget. Planted Media made it so easy. They came to me, set up everything, and then they did some editing voodoo magic that made me look like $1 million. Go to plantedmediaco.com and tell them Rivers sent you, and you'll get a nice little Grandpa Channel discount. All right. Back to the show. Hello and welcome to the Grandpa Channel. I'm Steve Harris. I'm also known as Rivers. And today we have a delightful international guest, Kathy Nunn. And she's calling from Melbourne, Australia. Did I pronounce Melbourne?
You did.
We would say Melbourne, and it's incorrect. I know that. I found out about Kathy through my daughter, who's helping me produce all of these podcasts. And I think she's delightful. Tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit of your journey, Kathy, from originally from Wales to here to Australia. And then I wanted to ask you in particular about the experience you had writing a book with your grandson. Now that sounds really interesting. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I was born in Wales to Welsh-speaking parents who believed that I should only speak English. So I grew up understanding Welsh, but not speaking very much because they would smack my hand, in fact, if I spoke Welsh. And even today, I can still understand Welsh very well. My spoken Welsh is poor, but I got a really good grounding in Welsh culture growing up as a young child in Wales. We then moved to England, and eventually I went back to Wales to go to university in Wales to get my degree. And then I moved to Bristol to do my teaching qualification and met my husband-to-be. And he had the opportunity to move to Papua New Guinea and asked me if I was interested in moving with him. And off I went. I went off for 4 years to Papua New Guinea. Wow. We just loved it so much there. I went back to the UK to have my son, Andrew, who's now 40. And we took 7 months before we could get the papers to get into Australia. But we were very lucky. Down we went to Melbourne. And then when I had a little girl, and when our children were 6 and 4, we went back to Papua New Guinea and spent some time there again before coming back to Melbourne. And this is where we've been ever since.
Okay. Do you have any plan? Are you here for the duration in Australia?
Yes, Australia is really our home now, and where we've got the majority of our friends. Our son lives here with our 2 grandchildren and his lovely wife, but our daughter lives in London, and so she's done the journey back to the UK, and she's been there for many years. So we're sort of split between the 2 places in terms of our children.
So what do you and your husband do are you retired, or are you about to retire?
Yeah, so we are retired now, and that sort of came about at around the time of COVID. So I don't know if you're aware that in Australia it's pretty tough during COVID, and Victoria, where we live, had the worst lockdown ever. So, and during that time, we had a business which we had merged with another company. It was actually a relocation business of all things. So you can imagine how we were impacted by COVID.
Yeah, massively in fact.
Yeah, but we merged with another company that brought in a managing director who's superb. And through that period of time, we sort of moved away and just became non-executive directors of the business, which we still are. My husband was with us in finance, and he's still on a couple of boards. And they decided that I needed to write, which is my passion. So started writing some books, and they're based on real characters being 11th and 12th century Wales.
Really?
Yes, and I write under the name Arianwen Nunn. So that's a good Welsh name, Arianwen. And so I started to write. So my time is spent writing and spending time with my grandchildren, when we can, traveling as well. But my grandchildren obviously take up a lot of really good time. It's fantastic time that we spend together.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about was you wrote a book with your son. Now, how old was your grandson at the time?
I wrote it for his 7th birthday. I've got it here. This is, I don't know if you can see.
Oh, yeah. Keep it there for just a sec.
Yeah.
The Warrior's Wonder. I like the alliteration. It's very cool.
Yeah. Well, my grandson actually came up with that, and I tell you what happened. So I started to write these historical fictions, and I'd written a couple, and my grandson was very interested in them and wanted to know the story of them. And then he said, Nana, he said, will you write a book for me? And I said, yes, so I'll write a book. And he said, can we do it together? I said, yes.
Really?
Uh-huh. And he said, I want to call it The Welsh Warrior's Wonder. So he came up with the name.
Oh, that's very cool.
And we had heard a story, or I had told him the story. And it's in Welsh legend, and I believe that there is truth in it. Long before Columbus, so in 1172, there was a prince who set off from Wales with his brother and came to what is America.
Where do you know where along the coast?
They believe that it was Mobile Bay. So they believe that it was there. There's been lots of different theories about where they ended up. So I've heard Tennessee River, Missouri River, there's lots of different theories. But it seems that he made it back again. Mm-hmm. And he took 10 ships from Wales. They set off from Lundy Island the second time, and they took 10 ships and was never heard of again. But in the 17th century, Welsh preachers went across and started meeting with the tribes, the native tribes. And at that time, they were very surprised that they met a tribe that had an understanding of Welsh.
Now that's interesting.
Yeah, and this particular tribe, the Mandan tribe, so Mandam, the Mandan tribe, there were reports of them using boats, which are very similar to the Welsh coracles. Now, the Welsh coracles are sort of round boats used for fishing, and they're made out of a very light framework of willow, and they're covered with skins from animals and tar. Yeah. And this Mandan tribe had a version of these coracles. Well, the coracles were used by fishermen in Wales because they were easy to carry down. They put them on their back, looked like turtles, I guess, walking along. Yeah. And they would fish, and then they would come back with the boat on their back. It was very, very light. And they would have taken those across to explore the rivers in America. Of course, they didn't know. Lots of people think that there could be an element of truth. There was another thing as well, that the Mandan tribe apparently had white hair when they grew older, which was, And so as well as speaking a kind of Welsh dialect, they also had buildings which had been dated way, way back, so before Columbus. And these were buildings that were very similar to some of the buildings in Wales, very similar in terms of their plan.
Now, if you tell me that they were drinking tea and eating crumpets, then this is really
No.
my mind.
Sadly not. But the interesting thing is that, back in the 1500s, Elizabeth I used the fact that Prince Maddock had reached America to say that she had claim on it. And she told the Spanish, lay off,
Lay off.
we got there first. We were back in 1170, he got there. And then in 1171 came back and took these 10 ships and was never heard of again.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild. I mean, I can't imagine that these boats would be all that big crossing the Atlantic Ocean to get there. Wow.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is, of course, that the Vikings, long before then, had gone across, and they do say that Vinland was, in fact, part of America. And there is tales too that actually the Irish, back in, I think it was the 8th century, went across, and they were the ones that got there first. Yeah. So
thinking we're going to get reparation requests from England and from Ireland somehow from all of this. That's really it. So now, were you teaching? Is your husband, is he Welsh too? Welsh?
No, my husband is English.
Mm-hmm.
And it was quite funny when we got married, because we got married in Wales, and there were tables of Welsh speakers and tables of English speakers. And the English speakers were looking at the tables of Welsh speakers, thinking, what on earth? They're speaking some other language, because they weren't used to people speaking Welsh. And the Welsh speaker was saying, Catherine has married an Englishman. Well, he's cool, and he's an accountant, I suppose.
They were wondering if you'd lost your marbles, right?
They were wondering if I'd lost my marbles.
Yeah. Okay. So your grandson suggested the title, and then how did you integrate him into writing the book?
Yeah. So I told him this tale about Prince Maddock and about the possibility that he discovered America with his brother Rurid, in fact. And so he kind of knew that he wanted to write about that story. He was fascinated about it. And he came up with the title, and then we kind of worked from there. And I had gone traveling with my husband, and we were away for 2 months. And Huey and I would be doing stuff together all the time in terms of sending each other little videos about what the next chapter would be.
Really?
And I remember, and I would read out what I had written, and then he would say whether he liked that or whether he didn't like that. And then we would do research together to find out what kind of animals there were in that time, and what we knew about the native Indians at that time, and what we understood about the landscape and all sorts of things, how they would survive. And he was just so fascinated. He would say, oh, Nana, can we have a dinosaur in this book? And I said, well, no, it's not really about dinosaurs, but could they discover some bones? So actually in the book, there is a time where the Maddock and his community discover some dinosaur bones and think it's a Welsh dragon. They think that it's the mythical Welsh dragon because they would know nothing about dinosaurs.
Like on the rugby teams and soccer teams, isn't that on the insignia? It's very cool looking.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, dragons are big in Welsh mythology. So that's how we kind of wove that into the book. But there was one time little Huey was there, and his dad he'd be sitting on his dad's lap and talking to me in video, just as we're doing now. And I said, we've got to a point now. Do you think that Maddock should marry a Native American girl? And he looked very troubled. Very troubled. He said, oh, no, he said, I don't think so. I think he would just want to be friends with all of them.
Well, little did maybe your grandson know that maybe that did happen. And that's why there might be Indians with blondish hair. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, that is. I don't know my Native American tribes all that well, but I do know a little bit about the Mandans. And yeah, and so yeah, when you said that tribe, I go, yeah, I've heard of the tribe before. So based on this, and it sounds like you had a wonderful experience, Kathy,
Yes.
with him. What kind of lessons can you? What are some ideas or some lessons that you have that might help grandpas who are looking for ways to connect? Because what a wonderful connection you've made with your grandson through this. And I would also hazard a guess that you made some wonderful connections with your son as you were doing that with your grandsons. And that's kind of one of the things that I think about the Grandpa Channel is not only is my target grandpas, but my target our grandkids, but also if I've, as we say in American English, if I've swung and if I've struck out as a dad, or I didn't look really great as a dad, maybe I can make up some ground and do better with grandkids. And then, but I can't help but think that my interactions with my grandkids are looked favorably upon by my children. And, there's a connection that way too.
Grandparents are really important, and our grandchildren, Huey and Eloise, are exceptionally lucky. They have 4 grandparents that adore them, and we're all different.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Lucy and Alan, who are my daughter-in-law Natalie's parents, and they are very different in their approach to the grandchildren in what they do. Lucy was a model, and she's got such creative flair, and she brings out that side of them, but particularly in Eloise, who really loves the dramatic. Alan has got a wealth of stories. He's got, I don't know how many cars that he tinkers with, and he loves going hunting and fishing. So he does that with Huey and Eloise. So they go off and they do that kind of stuff together. My husband is great at game playing, so he'll spend hours and days doing Monopoly with them or
I couldn't do that.
He's great, and he's a great sportsman. So
Is he?
so he's helping Huey to learn to play golf, and he will do lots of cricket and things like that with him in particular as well, and plays ball games with our little granddaughter Eloise. And for me, I'm a storyteller and I love nature. So we do kind of wild adventures, going crabbing over rocks and imagining we're pirates and that kind of thing together. So it was very natural for me I've been writing poems with them and, little stories, but it was very natural for me to write a story for Huey's 7th birthday, and I will do the same for Eloise on her 7th birthday. But the learnings were just incredible because, as I said, we were away at the time and, feeling the distance, and it's good to keep those connections when children are small. And I think that any grandparent has a story to tell of their own. I mean, our lives are interesting to them. They might be utterly boring to us, but they are interesting. And so I took that a step further in terms of the Welsh heritage, if you like, understanding a little bit about where I came from and runs through their blood as well, and took this history, and we learned so much together. And I found that children have a thirst for knowledge. There is, and one of the things they are most interested in is the people who are closest to them. And you don't have to be exceptional. Little stories about what you did as a child, funny little incidents are important to them.
Well, you've walked right into my trap, and here's the trap. What would you say to a grandfather or a grandmother? We don't discriminate, don't close the door on the Grandpa Channel to wonderful grandmas, but what would you say to someone who says, I haven't had anything interesting, I have no stories, and I've run into that before. What would you say, and then what suggestions might you have, Kathy, for these people to draw stories out of?
I think that all of us have lived in a time of incredible change. And if I look, I'm 67 years old, and if I look back at my childhood, it is almost inconceivable that we were doing the things that we were doing at the time. And I think any grandparent can start with where they started from, what their parents were like, what they ate. And even what we ate was different in those days. Let alone, we didn't have mobile phones or, the incredible technology. And I think also the way that we lived our lives was very different. I used to go and stay with my grandparents, and half of the day, my grandfather and I would be digging. My grandfather used to dig these huge trenches in the garden, and he'd fill them with potatoes.
Oh, okay.
Then, and the trenches would be where he would put his compost. So it was fashion back then to dig a trench, put your compost in, then put a layer of soil, then some more compost, and then, another layer of soil. Then you put your potatoes in there. And my goodness, those potatoes were incredible. Absolutely incredible. And we'd be sowing beans or, we'd be harvesting. And I think things like that took up half of a day. We wouldn't drive to the shops. We'd walk with our baskets to the shops. And I'd go with my grandmother to the shops with a basket, and we'd go to the butcher first. You'd choose your meat very carefully, and even the layout of the butcher's shop with animals all over the place, dead animals, was very different from what we have today.
Yeah, you don't see that in that.
No, but those little stories, or the sweet shop that you would go into, and you could get every sweets or lollies, they call them in Australia, known to man. And they would be in huge, great jars, and, they would weigh them out and put them in little paper bags. Kids love that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And you often find the kids will act out what you were doing as a child. Mm-hmm. And I can remember, as a very small child, walking through a field with my grandmother, which was close to the house that she still lived in, that she was brought up in. And there were these little, we called them tumps, little lumps, molehills, like huge molehills that had been there for, I don't know, 50 years or something. And she would say, oh, these were all of our shops. There would be a shop here, and this would be so-and-so's shop, and and this is how we would play. And then we would get, and she called it rice. She would pull on a certain plant, and all of these little pieces, little seeds would come up, and she'd throw them, and she said, and this is how we would pretend there was a wedding. Oh. And I can remember doing exact same thing because I wanted to be like her when she was a little girl.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think you have to have some amazing, extraordinary story. You don't have to have flown around the world or, spend time in a submarine. You just have to be yourself and relate something to them that they may be interested in, because you would know grandchildren are as happy just being with you as just doing very ordinary things with you, just to feel that connection. They don't need to know that you've done something exceptional.
No, I just totally believe what you're saying. I think that, the ordinary things are fascinating. For me, knowing details about their daily lives, my grandparents and my great-grandparents, and even my great-great-grandparents just absolutely fuel me with, I know it sounds corny, but with love. And I love my ancestors because I think in many ways we are our ancestors. We carry their DNA in us. And I just think that grandfathers could be a wonderful fountain of kind of ancestral knowledge and passing down things, to their grandkids. It sounds like you've done a wonderful job of talking about your Welsh ancestry. I mean, it would just be wonderful.
I think they enjoy it, and they love stories about my parents and my grandparents and all the different things that they did. I was very lucky. I was very, very close to my grandfather in particular. And in fact, this might sound very strange, but I was so close to my grandparents that when my parents moved from Wales to England, when I was a little girl, I would come back every single school holiday, for the whole sweet school holiday.
Really?
to stay with my grandparents. So I spent
Wow.
lots of time with them. And that really has informed the way that I treat my grandchildren, I think, as well, because I knew that my grandparents loved me so much. I was very, very close to them. And in fact, when we got married, that was why we got married in Wales, was because my grandfather arranged the wedding. Really, at 92 years old, arranged the wedding, which was extraordinary. And he lived to be 100 and
Did
had
he
so
really?
many. Yeah, oh yeah, he was an incredible fellow.
How would you describe him? What's a thumbnail sketch of your grandfather?
Terrific sense of humor. A little quirky, a little eccentric. He was actually, I see a lot of him in my grandson because very sharp, very bright, very inventive, can think, through problems very, very easily. But he was a storyteller. So he would have stories about everything and everyone. And he was well known for his storytelling as well. And he could be quite cantankerous at times. He was not without his flaws, as all of us are. But that sort of makes him
endearing.
more real, if you like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What? So I've got a kind of a question from left field. If somehow I could teleport your grandfather, this is your grandfather, and have him come and sit right here, and he's looking at you through this modern crazy technology we have, what do you think he would say to you, and what would you like to say to him?
I think he would probably say to me, "Is there any more you'd like to cram into your life?" He always used to say to me, he would talk about the lazy man's load, because when I was taking things from the table to the kitchen to wash up, I would take a huge load of stuff, and sometimes things would fall off left, right, and centre. But my aim was to get that task done as quickly as possible and to get on to the next one. And he believed that I was so busy with my fingers in so many pies that I should just concentrate on one thing at a time, not realizing that he did exactly the same thing.
Yeah, really?
Absolutely. And I would say, I would want to know, okay, you've been away for a few years now.
Yeah.
What's going on over there? Give us a little bit of insight.
Tell us about what your life is like. Now, I don't know whether you're a person of faith or not. I am. And I really believe that there's another life. And I've had a couple of really fun, kind of quick experiences. And so I know there's something there. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I really feel my and other people, other ancestors sort of rooting me on or kind of near in hard situations. So, I mean, I'm really looking forward to the next life. It's not that I've got such a great reward going on that I know of, but I just really think there's something there, Kathy. I really do.
I do too. And I think we've got to understand that there's something out there that's bigger than us.
Yeah.
And extraordinary things can happen sometimes. But I do feel sometimes very close to those that have passed on. And you sort of feel sometimes that somebody's looking out for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there has to be something bigger and better. And that I do believe very strongly in a sense of goodness in the world. And that when people harness that goodness, when people pull together, extraordinary things can happen.
Yeah.
And that's what community is about, good community.
Yeah. I'll tell you too that when you talking about your grandfather in particular, it makes me want to meet him really bad. Yeah. I mean, because the way that you describe him is not without warts or is not perfect, but I just, that we just have these people that our kids and our grandkids need to know. And if we don't tell them about our personal experiences with them, how are they going to know? If I get hit by an asteroid, it's like a library is being burnt to the ground if I don't pass on any of my knowledge and my love of my ancestors. I'm a naturally very curious person, and I love the historical. I wonder what life is like in Denmark in 900 AD, how hard the life would be, and how they never went probably a 10-kilometer, sort of from birth to death, and it must be hard if the weather was terrible and the crops were not good. Anyway, I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, but you know what? Since I've done a lot of research into history, I have come to the conclusion that in many ways their life was not necessarily harder than ours.
Really?
So certainly with disease and illness, yes, absolutely. Child mortality was very high, of course. But I think there are some things that are very tough in our lives. And I think that technology has brought good things, but it's also brought some bad things too. And if you think about even the way that people work, and, kids will be working and you will see them working really hard. Our kids work exceptionally hard. And that for them, there isn't necessarily an off. So in the time of my father, and certainly for a lot of my working life, it was 9 to 5. And then you switched up and you had a weekend. Now people don't necessarily have that. And they don't necessarily have peace from technology and being on poor people like. And that makes it very hard, and the stress is on society. Other things too, if I touch on something that isn't very nice, that children now have access to mobile phones and are being bullied from new phones. Now, if you think about schools, bullying has always been a thing, right? So there's always been kids that bully other kids at school. But when you went home, it was a safe place. Now, because of the access that other kids have to you, there is no safe place.
There's no safe place.
So I think going back to you talking about history, the threat was very different. Yes, there were threats that maybe the village would be invaded, but there's also pressures in our life as well. So in some ways, the community they had, the way that they would laugh and tell stories around the fire, the love that, they would love each other's children as their own, as part of the huge, great family. And we kind of lost that, some of us, I think, especially in big cities and the tyranny of distance. And people travel much more. Here we are, I left England and I ended up in Australia. So when we first came over, it was only the telephone call, and you make the telephone call and you send letters. Later, it became much easier. So that with my daughter, I go on WhatsApp and talk to her, and that's fine. But it's kind of interesting how life can be quite hard in some ways for us. And we think that it was very hard in the past, but maybe not in all respects.
I think that's a really valid point. Maybe I need to quit being so dramatic, thinking that they just slogged their way through life. But I want to go back and talk to all of them and say, what was your life like? What did you eat? It goes back to your point of how our kids would be fascinated with. So what kind of sweets did you get at the sweet shop? Or what was it like during World War I, which is a fascinating period of time. It's one of my favorite periods, historical periods. And so, okay, now in closing, you've got the bully pulpit here. We have like 187 followers. I mean, you can feel the power, can't you, Kathy? What would you say? What would you say to grandpas and grandkids and kids who are perhaps watching this?
I think a couple of things. I read something, I don't know who wrote it, but somebody who said that your children are the rainbow in your life, but your grandchildren, the pot of gold.
Oh, I love that. I've never heard that before. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
I think, I mean, you feel such love for your kids, don't you? And then this most unexpected love for your grandchildren, which is quite extraordinary. But what I would say to grandparents is, don't miss out and give them something that they will treasure for life. Because if you give them your attention, your love, your time, you are giving something they will never forget. And it's more valuable than anything else that you can give them. You can make them feel special in a way that their parents may not have time that particular day to give. Their parents will always be number one in their minds. The richness of that relationship, of course, is extraordinary. But the grandparents can give something extra, listen to them, take time, and forge a relationship which will stand the test of time. So that's what I would say to grandparents. And for grandchildren, I would say, ask lots of questions. Be curious. Yeah. Find out about your grandparents and your grandparents' grandparents, and find out about the lives that they live, because there are so many learnings, so many learnings from that, I think.
Those are wonderful pieces of advice. I'm so glad that we found you and that you came on for this podcast. And I feel like I have a new friend in Australia.
Oh, absolutely. And the same the other way around.
And I just think that we have so much to share and to help lift and motivate each other. I just love the ideas that you talked about with writing the books, and you've given, I'm so kind of energized, but yet I feel kind of tapped out. So I think I'm going to say goodbye, and then I'm going to go take a nap and think about all these things. Anyway, thank you so much, Kathy, and thank you for all of you who listened. That's it for today's episode of the Grandpa Channel. Leave a review, share it with a friend, or better yet, tell your favorite grandpa. We're on a mission to gather 1 million grandpas, storytellers, wisdom keepers, and lovable wild cards. Until next time, keep the mic hot, the memories fresh, and the jokes just slightly inappropriate. I'm out of here.